All right, so we're going to start the second half of our evolution of life form notes. I wanted to start with this quote by Charles Darwin. He says, "It is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change." So when we're thinking about natural selection, desirable traits, what's going to help a species survive, it's not just the strongest, it's not just the smartest. Those aren't necessarily going to be the most desirable traits. It's going to be whoever or whatever organisms are most responsive to change. So what will help an entire species survive, not just individual organisms? In science, we're really focused on a species, not just one single organism out of a species. So when we think about an entire species surviving, we want to have a lot of genetic diversity within that species. So if there's a lot of genetic diversity, that means that no matter what the environment changes to or how the environment changes, some organisms within that species will be able to adapt and survive. So if we have, thinking back to our peppered moth simulation from yesterday, if we have 10 different butterflies and they're 10 different colors, white, black, red, yellow, orange, green, blue, purple, pink, whatever, right? We have 10 different ones. And let's say coal power plant moved in next door to this forest and there was a lot of ash, a lot of pollution, and now all of the trees are brown. Well, if there's brown butterflies within that species is going to continue to survive. The other colors of that species might all die off and not reproduce, but the actual species itself will continue to survive in that environment. So we're thinking about genetic diversity when we're thinking about what's going to help a whole species survive. So evidence of evolution is what we're focusing on today. So we know that evolution has occurred based on our fossil records. So fossils provide scientists with a depiction of the history of life on Earth. We can compare the organisms that are alive today with the organisms of fossils to reconstruct our evolutionary history. When we compare the fossil record with organisms alive today, we focus on four main things. We focus on comparative embryology, comparative anatomy, homologous structures, and vestigial structures. So comparative embryology. This is my favorite one. I think this one is pretty cool, and I wish we were in school so that we could do it all together. But anyway, embryology is the study of embryos and their development. Developing embryos of different species have similar characteristics. These characteristics or these similarities hint at the genes inherited by common ancestors. Okay, so on your own, I want you to look at these 6 embryos that I've labeled A, B, C, D, E, F at the top. And I want you to try to guess what you think each of those embryos, what species those embryos belong to. So we have 6 different species represented here. What would you guess that they are? Take a minute, pause if you need to. Okay, so now the top row is the first stage of development. The second row is the next stage of development for these embryos. So in A, this one is the first stage, this is the second stage. So these two are the exact same organism, same organism, same organism. We have 6 different organisms here showing first stage of development and then a following stage of development. So now what do you think these embryos represent? Okay, pause if you need to. Okay, so our first organism was a fish, and then a salamander, a tortoise, a chick, a rabbit, a human. Isn't it crazy how when they're born, these organisms are totally different? Like they aren't even the same. I mean, humans are mammals and a fish is not a mammal, right? So why is it then that the first stage of development, all of these organisms look so similar? That would be comparative embryology. Okay, comparative anatomy. Analysis of body structures of 2 or more species that provides insight into the genetic and biological similarities and differences across species. So when we look at these 2 pictures, this one's pretty similar to homologous structures. But when we look at these pictures, let's look here at the top at first. We have human, cat, whale, bat. Human, cats, whales, and bats all have similar structures within their skeleton. So the purple bones all match up. The brown bones, the phalanges all match up. So even though these body parts are used for different things, humans it's an arm, cat it's a leg, whale it's a fin, bat it's a wing, they still have very similar anatomical structures. Same with this bottom picture down here. We have a human, a dog, I want to say that's an ostrich, but it doesn't look as fat without all its feathers. So again, we see all of the different bones color-coded to show us how the anatomy is very similar. So even though it's different species, we still have some similar anatomical structures within our different body types. So homologous structures, similar body structures or systems with the same evolutionary origin. They may or may not have the same function. So again, this is very similar to the picture we looked at on the last page. This time we've added in a bird and a horse. So again, all 6 of these species have the same bone at the top. All 6 of these species have some type of phalange at the bottom, but all of these body parts are used for different things. They don't have the same function. Bats and birds fly. Cats and horses use this as a leg. Humans use it as an arm. Whales use their fin to swim, right? Okay, our last one, this one's also pretty cool. So vestigial structures are structures that have no apparent function. So this suggests the loss of the original function due to evolution. So let's start here with the snake. This snake has little tiny baby skeletal legs inside of its body, but a snake doesn't walk. So it still has leftover super tiny leg bones, essentially hind legs, that have zero function at all. So that could suggest to scientists that maybe our modern day snake has evolved from some organism a long, long time ago that still had legs, right? In this specific type of whale, this little tiny bone that they have zoomed in to show you are hip bones. Why in the world would a whale have hip bones if a whale doesn't have legs, right? It's not even attached to the spine. So this could suggest that possibly this whale may have evolved a long, 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 long time ago from some type of organism that had legs, or maybe had something that was obviously attached to hip bones, and it just hasn't evolved out of this whale yet. And then when we think about humans, we have 3 different vestigial structures. The first one is wisdom teeth. So a lot of people, I don't know, you guys are probably too young to have had your wisdom teeth removed. I got mine removed in high school. A lot of people have to get their wisdom teeth removed because their mouth is too small. And if they leave their wisdom teeth in, then it will crowd their teeth and they'll get messed up and have to get braces again, right? So a lot of people have to get wisdom teeth removed. We don't need them. It's a vestigial structure. At the base of our spine, we have a coccyx bone or our tailbone. Well, we don't have a tail. Why would we have a tailbone, right? And then within our digestive tract, we have an appendix. Maybe you have heard of somebody having appendicitis and they had to get their appendix removed. That happens, but the appendix itself, we don't have any scientific evidence that tells us that it actually has a function within our body. So the 3 vestigial structures that are in humans would be wisdom teeth, coccyx, and appendix. So again, all of these different pieces of evidence for evolution, the vestigial structures, homologous structures, comparative anatomy, and comparative embryology, scientists use all of those things as evidence for evolution of life forms. So what happens if an organism doesn't evolve? If we have a species and they are not evolving, what's going to happen to them? They're going to go extinct. So let's remember that extinction is a species having no living members. Most species, let's see if I can get rid of that. Yep. Most species that have lived on Earth are no longer living. So we've got some dinosaurs here. Hopefully we were remembering that those lived during the Mesozoic era, a dodo bird, a woolly mammoth. So a lot of the species that have lived on Earth are now extinct. They did not evolve. They're not still currently alive. Okay. So what we have next, our next activity is evolution evidence. It's a web quest, so I will post a video on that. If you have questions about these notes, you can email me, post under Google Classroom, send me a remind message, come to office hours on Thursday after our team meeting. Anything that works for you works for me.